KCAL News Sports Director Jim Hill is joining us now. You spoke with us earlier on the phone. First of all, thank you for speaking with us through your grief, Jim, this morning. I know this is a hard morning for you.
No, it's more difficult than hard.
Yeah.
Jerry's one of the 5 most important people in my career.
Wow.
And we knew he was ill. But I've talked to a lot of people, and in just a couple of moments, we're going to have Bill Plaschke on from the LA Times. It's tough. It's hard. I mean, when you're talking about someone who is important to you, not only professionally but personally. There were a lot of times I'd call Jerry in the middle of the night and say, "Jerry, I need to talk." He said, "What is it?" And it wasn't only just to me. He was like that with everybody. He's a gift from the heavens above. And like I said a little while ago, the likes of a Jerry West shall never pass our way again. For those who knew him and he helped, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those who didn't have the privilege of being in his presence, you missed out.
We didn't. Tell us more about him. Was he funny? Was he stern? What was he like as a person?
Every emotion you could think of, he was. But one of the great things about him was that he knew exactly how to apply a certain characteristic to a certain situation. It's like he had the gift. I mean, not only in basketball, but people from other sports would call him. Commissioners from other sports would call him because he had that reputation. And word spreads. Word spreads when you do things bad. Word spreads when you do things good. And Jerry always did good by people. He was good in the community. He was giving back to the community, giving back to charities. He made sure that his players and his organization did that. But don't get it twisted now. When Jerry wanted to come down on you, he did.
He didn't like to lose, right?
You didn't want the wrath of Jerry West coming down on you. But from a personal standpoint, once again, one of the 5 most important people, not only in my professional career, but my personal career, my personal life. He helped me in some situations that I thought were just horrific. And he would say, "James," when he said that, everything just kind of calmed down. But there are others that have stories that are much more graphic than mine. But I'm so glad that I passed his way, because some of the things that I've learned are going to help me for a lifetime. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I know you have someone special on the phone you wanted to talk to a little bit.
Yeah, Bill Plaschke of the LA Times.
Yeah, I think he's with us.
Yeah, is Bill, you there?
Yes, I'm there. Yes, it's a very sad morning.
Yeah, Bill, talk to us about just a little bit about what he meant to us, not only as professionally, but personally.
Well, he was professionally. He was the most important person in the history of professional basketball in Southern California. Remember, he was the first draft pick of the LA Lakers. He brought basketball here. He made basketball popular here. He built Showtime. He built Kobe and Shaq. He's the architect of the greatest basketball trophy we've had here. I mean, he's the logo. He's the legend. He's Mr. Clutch. He's everything. And he was, I think the word you were asking about how to describe it, the best word for me would be tortured. He was so tortured, wasn't he, Jim? He always, when he lost, he couldn't take it. When there was uncertainty, he couldn't take it. I remember trying to get a hold of him during the Lakers' first championship run with Shaq and Kobe in 2000. And he wasn't at the game. And I called him and said, "Where are you?" He was driving on the 101 freeway, up and down the freeway during the game, because he couldn't stand to watch it. He was driving his car, listening to the game on the radio, getting updates on the radio because he couldn't stand to watch it. He was so tortured. He was he had to win. He had to succeed. And he succeeded. He was such a class guy. Like he said, he talked to everybody, talked to me for hours on end, anytime you called him. And I think it hurt him. I think, Jim, what gets me is that the announcement of his death was made by the Clippers. And I love the Clippers, and I love Steve Ballmer, and I love the organization. I love everything they're doing. But Jerry West was a Laker. And it's sad that he wasn't able to go out of this world as a Laker. I think that would make him sad too.
You know, Bill, and also there are stories of players, of Laker players, of other players in the NBA that Jerry helped not only professionally but personally. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, he was a great sounding board for everybody. He would talk. He'd ask about your life, he'd ask about your career, and ask about how you're doing, and ask about my columns and how my columns are doing. He was very much like that. He was, he's a touchstone for everybody. You know, up until he would come in, he'd come into the games very regally, and he'd sit down. And he was 6'4". Every inch of 6'4". He had the shock of white hair. He'd sit down in the baseline, and people would just come up to him like he was a guru or a god, looking for advice, looking for wisdom, looking for encouragement, looking for anything. He was like that. He was Southern California basketball. He really was, and it's such a giant loss. It's such a huge loss. And again, I wish he and the Lakers had made up at the end of it, and he was a Laker. Let's face it, he was a Laker. He worked with Golden State, worked with Memphis, and his career with the Clippers. He was so good to him. Such a classy organization. But Jerry West will be forever in my mind a Laker. Arguably, Jim, the greatest Laker.
Yeah, you're right.
And you can say Kobe, but Jerry West spanned both. Jerry West spanned both of them. Jerry West cultivated magic and traded for Kobe. So I think you really get the argument. I'll probably make that my column today. He was the greatest Laker ever.
Bill, I appreciate you taking the time because I know you're busy with your column and busy with people calling you. I appreciate it, and I know what you meant to Jerry and the influence that he had on you and to all of us. And thanks so much for taking the time.
Anything for you, Jim, anything at all. Call anytime. Thank you.
You got it, buddy. Thank you. Now, there's one of the premier columnists in the whole country having difficulty describing what Jerry means to him like I am. Mm-hmm. I wish you had been around him. I wish you had been around him and had talked to him. He would have changed your life. Mm. You know, he was a gift from the heavens above. Every once in a while, the big person upstairs sends someone down to say, ding. And that's what he did with Jerry West. Mm. Said, Jerry, I need you to go down there and help not only athletes, but people just in everyday life. There were people that called him about money issues that they had. And what did he do? He helped them. Mm. So I'm glad that we had a chance to meet him, not understand him, because he had his Jerry West ways now. Mm-hmm. That no one understood. No, you're not supposed to understand. All you're supposed to understand is what he told you and the advice that he gave you. Right. So, but I will forever be indebted to Jerry West for what he has done for me, like I said earlier, not only professionally, but more important, personally.
Certainly. Well, Jim, thank you for sharing that
really
as you're grieving.
Your insight as well,
you got
personally and professionally.
Yes.
Thank you, ladies.
And he'll live on through you and all the lives he touched. A legend lost this morning, and KCAL Sports Director Jim Hill has been joining us this morning as he deals with his own grief to share a lot about his legacy this morning. You know, we've been talking about, you're saying, we wish that you guys had met him. We wish that we had. For those who didn't know, I think what's beautiful, the statue outside of Crypto.com Arena, his silhouette on the NBA logo, this is someone whose legacy is never going away.
Not only that, but even more so. He helped change a lot of lives. There were a lot of, and I know personally of instances where individuals, not only players, but just citizens, they would call and say, Jerry, I need to talk to you. And he would help them out. He had this gift from the heavens above that comes along once every 1,000 years or whatever. But the players that I have talked to, as you can imagine, are very, very sad. I really appreciate Bill Plaschke taking the time to talk a little while ago. But he touched us in ways that we never thought we could be touched. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when you're a guy and you're playing sports and you got Mr. Macho and you think you know it all you have to do is just talk to Zeke from Cabin Creek, was his nickname. And he would just kind of bring you back down to earth and let you know that you're not all that. So it's a day of remembering, it's a day of mourning, but actually it's a day of giving thanks, because I am so thankful that he passed my way.
And there are so many different types of intelligence that he seems to have been so good at the emotional intelligence, at being an executive, at being an athlete and a player, and at just, as you've been talking about, counseling people and changing people's lives behind the cameras, you know, not getting a notice or attention for it.
Yeah, he had that gift of being able to talk to kings and queens, and also relating to the common man on the corner. There was a story joking about him, and he did not deny it, but we were joking with him about, you know, one day he was driving and he got off the freeway and got under the bridge and stopped, and there were some people that were living under the bridge. They even know who Jerry West was. And he was so gracious in saying he helped him out. So he didn't mind pulling over and stopping and helping like that. But he was so stern. A lot of times you knew he was right. You know how it is when you know somebody is right, but you don't want to admit that they're right?
Yeah.
That was him. That was one of the great qualities that he has. His family is just absolutely wonderful. And we've all learned a great deal from Jerry West. And of course, all across not only the NBA, but all of sports and all of mankind, anyone who came in contact with him will remember him for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that says a lot about him, that legends like you, Michael Jordan paying tribute this morning, the greats thought he was the great.
Well, you know, sometimes you know what's good for you, but you don't want to admit it. He had this way of saying, Jim, come on now. You know I know better than that. Don't try and fool me. That's what he did to a lot of people. And you have to admit it. And he had such a way of doing it. He was such a terrific family man. He was this gift. And I'm certainly glad that I had a chance of meeting him, because like I said earlier, he kind of straightened me out a little bit at one time myself.
What is something that people don't know about him?
Jerry's brutally honest. He was open. He would just talk to people. Like I said, there was just this aura about him that made you want to just go up and just talk to him. Or when he talked to you, instead of saying, oh, that's okay, what was that you said
listen.
again? Oh, yes, absolutely. So it was those kinds. I wish more people could have had the opportunity to be in his presence and to gain some of his wisdom, because if that had ever happened, those people like myself, we'd be much better off than we were before we met him.
If it's not too personal, tell us one of the times he had to straighten you out. I'm intrigued.
No, I can't tell you about that.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Skip to another one.
But no, but see, oh, no, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I had just retired and started working here. So when you play in the NFL, you get kind of full of yourself. Yeah, well, no. So he pulled me in his office at the Forum, and he said, you know, I know about you. I said, you do? He said, yeah. He said, I know about that touchdown pass that you gave up that cost you guys a game back up in Oakland. I said, you do? He said, yeah. He said, but I also know about that interception that you had to save the game. He could tell that to people about a lot of, he could tell you stories about yourself that you didn't think he knew. I had this great relationship. I could call him and just talk about anything at any time, personal, professional. And you didn't have to say off the record. We already knew that. And what I learned from him is about trust. Trust is the most important quality you can have in a person, or a person can have in you. If someone trusts you, that's not gold, that's platinum right there. So he taught me about trust, and that's one of the reasons why I think I have a lot of fun with athletes today, because we can talk, and we automatically know it's off the record. We automatically know that I trust you or you trust me. And I learned those qualities from Jerry West.
Oh, well, thank you for coming in early and sharing your your knowledge and your stories with us and with the viewers, and I know that he will be deeply missed. So we appreciate it.
We're sorry
for your
Jim.
loss.
Thank you.
All right, and those tributes, as we talked about, are pouring in online this morning. Michael Jordan, who texted this message to Stephen A. Smith, said, quote, "I am deeply saddened at the news of Jerry's passing. He was truly a friend and a mentor, like an older brother to me. Rest in peace, logo."
And here's what the Dodgers posted. Quote, "The Dodgers mourn the passing of NBA Hall of Famer and Lakers legend Jerry West, an indelible figure on the Los Angeles sports landscape for more than 60 years. We send our most sincere condolences to his family and friends."
KCAL Sports Director Jim Hill is joining us now to talk more about Jerry West's life and legacy. Jim, it's good to have you here so early with us. I know that you knew Jerry on a personal level. Let's begin with talking about the relationship that you had with him.
Oh, Jerry's one of the most 5 or 6 important people in my career, in my life, really. He helped me not only with broadcasting here, but he helped me just to grow and to develop. Everybody in sports knew about Jerry West, knew about Zeke from Cabin Creek. And when I had a chance to meet number 44, I was in awe of him, but I was also taken by the calmness and the coolness and how we could relate to each other. And that's how he was with everyone. He was able to he was able to walk with kings and queens, and then also talk to the common man. So Jerry West was given a gift, and he was a gift for all of us.
Yes, and so many of us have seen him in video, on TV, watching him play, watching him speak. But can you maybe tell us something about him that most people don't know?
Jerry was an open book. If he liked you, he told you. If he didn't like you, he told you even faster.
Oh, wow, okay.
But one of the great things about him is that his reputation was such, because remember, he was the logo on the NBA jerseys. So he had people from other sports to call him about situations that they were going through. He had other commissioners to call him. I would have loved to have seen his telephone book and the numbers that he had in it.
Yes,
some people said that he even had the hotline number to the White House.
Oh, yeah.
But people would call and seek Jerry out, seek out his advice, seek out his knowledge, because not only did it make them and us better athletes, hopefully it made us better individuals.
Can you talk a little bit about his love of the game? I mean, he stuck with basketball late in life as far as being a part of the programs.
He loved the game of basketball so much that he played through injuries where other people would have set out.
Oh, okay.
Jerry mentally, he was as tough, and maybe the toughest individual one of the toughest individuals I have ever met, because he knew he was going to play, he wanted to play, but he knew in order for him to play, he had to be mentally tough. And people will tell you just how mentally tough he was, not only in sports, but he was mentally tough in life as well. You didn't want to cross him. And if he liked you, he would do anything for you.
But, he played, which I had to look it up when I first heard about his death, that he started playing in 1960.
Yes.
And the fact that he still has such an influence on the game all these years later, what do you think it was that just kept his influence so strong?
His reputation as a player, his reputation as a man of his word, his reputation in business, and also, you got to remember, he was the logo.
Yes.
So that made everyone constantly remember how important he is, because the league is not going to put someone's logo like that on every jersey unless it's not special, but extra special and extraordinarily special.
And the fact that it never changed.
Yes.
I mean, there's been a lot of amazing basketball players since him, but that logo still remains.
Well, when you're the first and you make the kind of impression on people that he made, and is still going to make, you remember it for a lifetime. And you like to have that memory in the back of your mind. And here is the way that the league is choosing to have that memory in the back of our minds, by having the logo on all the jerseys.
Wow. Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us and sharing your own personal
My pleasure.
experiences and
Thank
time
you.
with Jerry West.
Thank
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, there is a lot of reaction coming in from the sports world this morning. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver released a statement saying, in part, Jerry West was a basketball genius and a defining figure in our league for more than 60 years. He distinguished himself not only as an NBA champion and an all-star in all 14 of his playing seasons, but also as a consummate competitor who embraced the biggest moments. He was the league's first Finals MVP and made rising to the occasion his signature quality, earning him the nickname Mr. Clutch.
Now here to talk more about his incredible legacy in LA and also the sports world is our sports director, Jim Hill. Thank you so much for being here. I know this is a tough day for you and the entire sports world. I was looking on social media and just seeing all of the comments saying what a great person he was, people who knew him saying he was someone that you really just wanted to be around, and he had this presence about him every time he walked in the room. So what do you want people to take away since you knew him personally about his personality and who he was?
Jerry West was a brutally honest person. I mean, brutally honest. If you didn't want the truth, then don't ask him, because he's going to tell you. He was a tremendous judge of talent. He was someone, he could be someone that was a confidant of yours, but he was also someone that you could trust. And I learned in my dealings with him that of all the descriptive adjectives that are out there, if someone trusts you, then it doesn't get any better than that.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what I learned from him. I just learned that just if you earn someone's trust, don't do anything to, to fracture it, because once you lose that trust, that's it for that person. He was a good friend. He was a good family man. He was wonderful there were other people in other sports that would call Jerry West to try and get advice and to consult him on some of the issues that they had in baseball and football. Oh yeah, because once you're the logo, that means everyone looks up to you. And in this particular instance, everyone did look up to Jerry West.
Now, I know you knew him really well, so it's probably difficult to pick out one memory, but what is something that stands out to you when it comes to your interaction with him, when it comes to, his legacy? What's the one thing that you remember the most?
That's a good question. That's a cool one. I remember one time he said to me, when I was first getting started, he said, "Let me tell you one DAMN thing." He says,
Thank you for spelling that out.
Yes.
I got that.
Like everybody at home knows. I know. He said, when you go to a press conference, you get your butt up and sit in the front row. He said, when it's time to ask questions, you make sure you put your hand up, and you keep your hand up until they let you ask a question. Just get it up there.
And you did that.
I'm trying to do it.
You're still doing it.
No, it was just those small things. Whenever you go someplace, I don't care where you're going. He said, even if you're getting on a plane going put your shirt and tie on. And he was really adamant about that. He was adamant about helping people that he thought were going to be hard workers. And I'm so glad that I had the privilege and the honor of being in his presence for just a very short period of time. Because as I've said before, the likes of a Jerry West shall never pass our way again.
You saying that makes me think of the legacy he leaves behind, the stamp he's made in the league and obviously in other people's lives as well. What do you hope people take away from looking at his career, from looking at his life? What do you hope people gain from that? Hard
work pays off. Nothing is easy. Nothing is given to you easy. You have to work for everything that you achieve. Don't stop. Life, like sports, is difficult.
Yeah.
There's ups and downs, and you're going to get hurt, and you're going to get set back, and all these things. You got to fight your way through it. No one is going to just give you something. You've got to fight your way through it. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in the Almighty. And he even told me about one of my favorite sayings. He said, Jimmy, remember, you got to keep the faith.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You do. You really do. He's had so many achievements in his career. What's the one thing that stands out to you the most when it comes to the stuff he's done for the league?
The thing that stands out to me, yeah, there's so much, but the thing that stands out to me is he's the logo.
Yeah.
You look on everyone's jersey in the NBA, there's a logo of Jerry West. So that tells you all you need to know about what the sport thinks about him and will continue to think about him, what the executives in the NBA would think about him, and what all of mankind thinks of Jerry West. When you put someone's logo on the uniform and everyone wears it, all the superstars, the real superstar is Jerry West.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
My pleasure.
I'm
Thank
so
you.
sorry for your loss, but I'm sure he's looking down right now and being so appreciative of all the things that you're telling everyone who didn't know him, who get to live through him, through you.
And he will probably say, don't forget, put your shirt and tie on if you're flying on a plane. Yeah.
And make sure you work hard.
That's right.
Because nothing's free.
That's right.
Thank you so much. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you.